I'm Sienna. I'm the kid.
I'm Sarah. I'm the mom.
This is Queer Kid Straight Mom.
Let's talk. Welcome back to Queer Kid Straight Mom. This week we are talking about Taylor Swift and the phenomenon known as
Gaylorism.
Gaylorism, which I had not heard of until Sienna informed me. But apparently, there's a group of people on social media who are extremely emotionally invested in the idea that they have come up with that Taylor Swift is secretly gay, which is kind of an odd thing to speculate about for somebody you don't know. But everybody has their celebrity things, right?
Not me. I don't really care.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like you're imagining a version of that story where in my mind, those characters are gay.
No. This is an entirely different thing. Because I have absolutely no problem. I am actually a big supporter of, people want to write fan fiction about fictional characters or whatever. Yeah, I have all sorts of crazy theories about movies and books and stuff. However, I feel like there's a difference when we get into real people and their real lives.
Which is part of what's problematic about this, right? Is that you're treating Taylor Swift like she's not actually a real person. She's a fictional character in their minds, sort of.
This is the thing, right? Is I'm perfectly happy to be like, yes, Glinda is definitely in love with Elphaba without necessarily being like Ariana Grande is in love with Cynthia Erivo. Because that becomes weird.
Yes, a little weird. So this started years ago. There were vague rumors about Taylor Swift and her alleged romantic relationship with her friend Carly Kloss and ensuing falling out. And other people thought, oh, that's more than a friendship. That is really what I knew about it. I had not really seen the online speculation in that world. So where do you think that is rooted beyond those celebrity gossip stories?
I do think that's kind of where it started probably, but I think what kind of made it blow up or become a bigger thing in people's minds was this sort of pivot she had around 2020-ish. Because, she had these couple of albums, Lover and Reputation, that were very pop, very, produced, kind of, again, traditional pop sound. And then all of a sudden she kind of had this hard left turn into a lot moodier, more pared back, the sound and aesthetic that really resonated with a lot of queer people that I think does borrow from a lot of queer aesthetics. And a lot of songs on a couple of albums named after women. And of course, having one song from the perspective of a guy who's in love with a girl, that I think that's kind of what sparked a lot of the broader discussion.
Okay. I was doing a little research on this, and it appears that when Taylor Swift made You Need to Calm Down, she had some conversations with friends that had made her really aware, she said, of what it's like to be in that community. So one of the things she said around the time that song came out is, rights are being stripped from basically everyone who isn't a straight, white, cisgender male. I didn't realize until recently that I could advocate for a community that I'm not a part of. It's hard to know how to do that without being so fearful of making a mistake that you just freeze. Because my mistakes are very loud. When I make a mistake, it echoes through the canyons of the world. It's clickbait, and it's a part of my life story, and it's a part of my career arc. Saying, kind of that she had become more aware of this, and also maybe in response to people saying, why are you speaking up about this now, that she wasn't sure how to bring it up before, which I could see if there are all of these people speculating about whether you're gay, how maybe less so now, but I think 10 years ago, people were more reluctant to, and then maybe we've gone backwards again, but I think for a long time, people were reluctant to show their support for the queer community because, oh, if I show my support, they're going to think I'm gay.
Mm-hmm.
But around that time, she introduced a petition in support of the Federal Equality Act, which would amend the Civil Rights Act to outlaw discrimination based on gender identity and sexual orientation. On Instagram, she endorsed Democrats for the Tennessee legislature and called out the Republican running for Senate, Marsha Blackburn. She believes businesses have a right to refuse service to gay couples, Swift said. She also believes they should not have the right to marry. These are not my Tennessee values. And she also donated $113,000 to the Tennessee Equality Project, which advocates for LGBTQ plus rights. So, there was this sort of flurry of involvement, which, as is always the case whenever a famous person does anything, was met with like, now you're saying something, and like people speculating that like, oh, well, this seems like a good money move, right? Corporations are making a lot of money off, what we've talked about as rainbow washing before. And she's a savvy businesswoman. So she's seeing money in it for her if she supports this community. The Onion had the headline, Taylor Swift inspires teen to come out as straight woman needing to be at the center of gay rights narrative. Just like kind of mean and also kind of funny. I read an op-ed from The Guardian by Amelia Abraham that said you cannot just suddenly decide to be a queer ally and earn the right overnight. Vox said a similar critique could be aimed at Swift. This was in a piece about queer baiting, who is speaking out in support of LGBTQ causes at a time that's financially convenient, borrowing from subcultures that have already been proven to be lucrative, drag, for instance, and incorporating them into her brand. She's also recently performed at the Stonewall Inn, which some compared to hosting a straight bachelorette party at gay bars. What is your response as a member of the queer community and the responses that you have seen among the people who feel that she was queer baiting or that they were led on in some way?
Well, we've talked about this before, that there's a couple different things people mean when they say queer baiting. And one of them is very much not actually queer baiting, which is, writing songs about women is not inherently queer baiting. Exploring your sexuality is not inherently queer baiting. Using your art to express yourself is not inherently queer baiting. What is queer baiting is deliberately, knowingly looking at, oh, this is a profitable way I can spin myself to make more money. I think that based on the information available back in 2019, when these articles were being written, I don't really know that the publicly available information, it's really fair to say that. It appears to me at that point in time that this is a straight woman, perhaps somewhat clumsily, trying to help a community and maybe making a little bit about her. Okay, fair enough critique. That being said, I do not think that her actions over the last year or two have necessarily helped her case, because she has been a lot less politically active over the last few years than she had been in the past. Did she ever actually endorse Harris?
Yeah.
Okay.
She did.
She took a lot longer to endorse Harris and was relatively muted about it, I think the general impression was. And a lot of people have gotten the impression from her last couple of albums that she is really less interested in advocating for people now, that she's perhaps gotten the impression that, oh, culture is kind of swinging in the opposite direction, like it's less profitable to ally yourself with the queer community now, that it's more profitable to sort of position yourself in this space of like straight, traditionally feminine woman marrying a man. How much of that is accurate? Probably we don't know. I think a lot of people just see the timing and the framing of her engagement as really suspect given the broader cultural context. Like I said, I'm really, really hesitant to assume all of this is some sort of giant master plan, because Taylor Swift is not just a corporation the way that Bud Light is, right? When Bud Light does something, you're like, okay, there's like a bazillion stakeholders behind this saying, how can we possibly make the most money off of this? And what are our statistics telling us? And what are all our marketing experts telling us? And okay, well, gay people aren't profitable anymore, so let's drop them. Taylor Swift does have all of that going on, and she is obviously incredibly wealthy and has a lot of, people giving her advice. And she's, like you said, a very savvy businesswoman. She's also one individual person. And so I don't know that attributing the same level of like connivingness that we attribute to an actual corporation is necessarily entirely fair.
Well, yeah, I mean, with that stuff, intention matters, right? There's a couple of other pieces that I read, and this one I actually learned a new word from, which is Celesbian gossip.
Mm-hmm.
You know of this.
Vaguely.
Apparently, a lot of people in this sort of world of Celesbian gossip felt a little bit jilted, I guess, for lack of a better word, because around that time that You Need to Calm Down came out, there's always like this flurry of like, oh, there's an announcement coming with Taylor
Mhm.
Swift. And because of the song and because she had posted, pictures with like rainbows, and there was a feeling that, oh my God, she's going to announce that she's gay.
Mhm.
And it was just that she had a new album coming out, which is kind of what she does. And I think intention matters because maybe it was all very calculated in a sort of nefarious way of the bottom line. Or
Or she's just kind of a clueless, oblivious straight white lady.
or she's clueless and oblivious, or it's somewhere in between, just
Mhm.
that, like, oh, this is kind of fun. This is intrigue. This is
Mhm.
attention, without really thinking through the consequences of how that might, like, get people really excited to have this, like, sort of iconic musician represent your demographic, right?
And I think that's probably the most likely answer. Like, it's somewhere in between, yes. She is very calculating in a lot of ways, and I do think that it's important, especially with some of the critiques that have come out with the lyrics in, again, her latest album, The Life of a Showgirl. Like, she's a very intelligent person, a very calculated lyricist, and so just giving her the benefit of the doubt and saying, she just didn't think it through," is being way overly generous, I think. That being said, obviously, it's very clear that she has a lot of sort of blind spots, that she has a lot of privilege, and it's not surprising that that would make her not process things. Now, that doesn't mean she doesn't have an obligation to put more effort into processing those things, because she is. She is literally the wealthiest woman on the planet. She has so much cultural capital, and she has so, I mean, like, there was a thing about, what was it, like Monterey Aquarium,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
where she, like, wore their sweatshirt, and then they, like, raised a crap ton of money within just a couple of days. So
Because people saw her wearing it and wanted it, and so the Monterey Bay Aquarium, which we've been to, it's amazing, by the
Mhm.
way, they were like, "Oh, let's see if we can still manufacture this shirt," and they did, and people bought it, and the aquarium raised a ton of money, and I'm only throwing this in because it also shows how, like, bitter so many people are. They're like, "Instead of donating money to it, she used them to sell T-shirts. She had nothing to do with it." People were like, "We want this shirt." And the aquarium was like, "Ooh, we can make this shirt and sell a ton of them because Taylor Swift wore it." She wasn't even involved.
Yeah.
And people were like, "She's horrible."
Which I think really demonstrates, right, the sort of different camps that people can fall into here, right? You can be like, "Oh, she's a perfect angel. Look at all this money she raised for the aquarium." Well, she wore a shirt and people wanted the shirt. Like, knowing that she has that much cultural influence, she has an obligation to be directing that into doing good in the world, even if maybe it ends up hurting her brand, because she is so powerful, she is so influential, that, yeah, I would say that she has an obligation there. Then you have people being like, "Okay, yeah, no, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that she can do that. Great. Okay." And then you have people who are just really angry. I think anything she does, there are people who will just come up with some nefarious reason behind it.
I just saw a picture of her and Sabrina Carpenter out to dinner, and Taylor Swift's wearing, like, big platform shoes like she does,
Mhm.
even though she's really tall, and, Sabrina Carpenter is really short. People were really upset that Taylor Swift would wear tall shoes when she was out with her short friend because that would make her tower over her friend, and that's so mean. Which, like, at that point, I feel like you just really genuinely want to find something to blame this woman for.
It's weird. Did anybody ask Sabrina Carpenter if she cares? Sabrina Carpenter obviously has a lot of self confidence. I don't know why she would care if Taylor Swift was taller than her. They're just chilling and having a good time, presumably to the best of all of our knowledge. So why are you blowing this up into a thing for no reason?
Yeah, it's very strange. So, talking about her influence, I saw this interview with Jennifer Lawrence recently that I can't decide how I feel about, but the interviewer asked her why she is not so outspoken about Donald Trump in this presidency as she was in the last one. And her response was that it's obvious that celebrity endorsements don't really make any difference in politics, and that ultimately she's an artist and she wants people to still watch the art that she's making and maybe learn and be changed by it than avoid it because of her politics. And I had to kind of like think about that because my first vibe was like, well, that seems kind of selfish. Like, I don't want to speak out about something that's going to make people not go to my movies. But I don't know. Like, do you think there's something to that? Do you think if teenage girls, especially like younger teenage girls, like still listen to Taylor Swift, or their parents will actually let them go to her concerts because they're not so offended by her politics? Like, do they learn something from her global worldview and kindness and compassion that maybe they wouldn't if they avoided?
Well, so I think the issue is that, maybe saying that 10 years ago when she is, like doing a lot of good, like writing that Ronin song for her special release of Red that benefited childhood cancer research, I think. And she's sending those messages and she is making that statement. That's fine. I think the issue is that I don't see a lot even of that more positive message in a lot of what she's doing nowadays. Mainly what I see is like this kind of girl boss mentality, right? Of feminism, because I'm a white lady who's attained a lot of power, which is not inherently a good thing if it's not challenging underlying structures of power. And so if what young girls are going to a concert and getting is I too can be a white lady with a lot of power that I mostly just use to benefit myself and tear down other singers around me. And I don't know, name dropping all of these expensive brands and hotels and whatever. That is not, I don't think, a really particularly meaningful message to most people. I mean, there are plenty of people who have no problem with Erica Kirk being a powerful white woman, and they're not doing any good in the world. She's not sending a powerful, meaningful, or she's sending a powerful message, but she is not sending a positive, uplifting message.
Right.
And so I think that is what is missing for me, is sending that message to her fans that this is how I should be using my power. I'm choosing to use my power to uplift people. I am not choosing to use my power to fly my private jet everywhere. That I think that there's something missing there.
That makes sense. Very cynical take.
But am I wrong then?
No, I don't think there's anything in there that I can disagree with.
Bottom line being like simply being a powerful white woman with a lot of money is not an uplifting message necessarily. And she has been leaning a lot into kind of personal grievances and a sort of white feminine aesthetic, and not necessarily things that are those uplifting messages that we'd like to see from her, even if they aren't explicitly political.
Fair. So returning to Celesbian gossip for a second, I came across that term in a piece in BuzzFeed News by Shannon Keating. This is a little bit of a long quote, but I just feel like I can't paraphrase this well enough. Celesbian gossip, like all celebrity gossip, isn't really about the celebrities. It's about us, about what we value in ourselves and in one another. It's about what we want in our partners and friends and communities. Do we have a responsibility to come out? What makes a good queer, a progressive queer, a hot queer, a likable queer? What kind of language do we use to define who we are? How important is our sexual orientation to the way we structure our lives? Why do we put some queer people on pedestals and not others? What do we want a queer-friendly world to look like? So lesbian gossip is also sort of soothing because it can mirror the way a lot of us feel in our daily lives, trying to suss out whether or not our crushes might return our feelings. What's your response to that?
So, yeah, that's fine, except that I think what most of us do in our day-to-day lives is talk about, yeah, that cute girl over there. Do we think she might be queer? Maybe we talk about it with our close personal friends. Maybe we think about it to ourselves. We would never consider it appropriate to post that online, to throw speculation about her sex life all over the internet. That crosses a line. And I don't think, yes, when you're a celebrity, especially when you're a musician who's singing about, your breakups and your past relationships and all of that stuff, to some extent you put that out in the public. But also Taylor Swift has really explicitly said, I am not comfortable with this speculation. It is not something that she's necessarily putting into her music in a really explicit way. And so feeling like we're somehow just as entitled to do that with her life when it's not something we would ever do with someone in our personal lives seems really unfair to me. And also, when we do that with someone in our personal life, it has a bearing on our lives, right? Me wondering if the girl I have a crush on might be queer is relevant to me because I might want to ask her out. I don't think I'm going to have a chance asking Taylor Swift out. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's not anything that really meaningfully impacts your life. It is something that you would like to see for your own kind of consumption. And I think that's a really important distinction.
Yeah. It's a spin on it that is more self-interested and maybe not fair to people that you're talking about.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that, it would be really cool to see such a powerful, influential person come out as queer and the potential good that it could do. But you could also put all of your energy into uplifting people who are comfortable taking on that mantle.
Right. Because if she's not, for one thing. And even if she were, yeah, I mean, that just feels incredibly obnoxious to like, I guess, put this value judgment on whether other people should publicly declare their sexuality.
Right. I mean, you might think it's the morally correct thing to do, but ultimately that is never, ever, ever your decision to make. It's not your decision to make for a person in your personal life. And it's certainly not your decision to make for a person that you've never met.
Yeah.
Also, like, imagine if all of these people who were so hardcore into Taylor Swift turned and like spent all of that energy uplifting Chappell Roan. There are other options out there if you really want a queer female pop star to idolize. I understand that she makes really good music and that a lot of us have really powerful emotional connections to her. I don't think that's a legitimate reason to like project your own insecurities and neuroses onto
Right.
her.
Exactly. There are plenty of queer pop stars out there already. And so to speculate and pick apart everything she does, you'd love for her to be in that box, but if she's not, she's not. And the frustration that she's marrying a man, I don't know, it's just odd.
Well, this is a really weird, like, a dynamic that we've discussed before. I don't think that Taylor Swift is queer because she's given me no reason to believe that she's queer. Like, I'm going to take people at their word. But if I were in the camp of people who are like, yeah, I'm picking up on all of these messages that she's like leaving in her songs, and I definitely like, she's definitely queer. I don't understand why so many of those people are seeing her marrying a man as such a betrayal, because that is really biphobic, actually. Newsflash, bisexual people exist. So, this idea that she's somehow been lying to you by putting sapphic imagery in her songs and then turning around and marrying a man is just, it doesn't make any sense. If you believe she is queer, her marrying a man does nothing to disprove that. It just doesn't. And so the fact that so much of this blow up recently, that people are just losing their minds over her marrying a man, I mean, does it affect Taylor Swift? Not really. But how do you think it affects the bisexual people in your lives, right? To see you saying, oh, she's marrying a man and she was telling me she was queer all this time, so she was lying to me. So are you then going to turn around and say that if your bisexual female friend marries a man? Is that going to be your reaction to that? That is a terrible message to be sending to the people around you.
Yeah, that's really delegitimizing bisexual people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, probably the fact that he's a football player and super masculine just doesn't really help.
And we like to make fun of Taylor Swift because she is so just complaining about people being mean to her in so much of her music, and it gets a little grating at times. But in fact, people do need to calm down.
Right.
Fortunately, when people freak out over stuff like this, it really just reinforces her point that people are so mean to me. It's so hard to be mean. Like, no, it's really not. Delete social media, maybe. But no, people are being really unreasonable.
Yeah, she might have a legitimate point with some of this.
Yeah.
And the people that complain about it are part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
As they often are. That's, yeah, fascinating stuff. We are going to have to pivot away from the pop culture stuff for a little bit here, even though we have really enjoyed this little diversion. Next episode, we are going to talk about the Supreme Court. Thankfully, they declined to hear Kim Davis's ridiculous case.
Take that, Kim Davis.
Right. But, it brings up interesting questions about, okay, so if there's no appetite for the Supreme Court to look at this, and that is good. But does that mean that gay marriage is secure? Will people keep coming after it? It's kind of an interesting topic. And then also with the Supreme Court and their recent ruling on passport markers, we just kind of wanted to talk about what that means and what you should know if you are a person who has, say, an X marker or a marker that doesn't match your sex at birth on your passport. Then what are the implications for you? What does this mean? How do you protect yourself? What could possibly happen? And so we just wanted to go over some of that information, talk about repercussions and legal protections. We'll talk about that soon. Catch you later.
Bye.
If you found this episode interesting, informative, amusing, please review and follow us on your podcasting platform of choice. Getting those reviews and follows really helps us show up more in the algorithm and be able to reach more people to help them. You can find us on social media, Instagram, and Threads at queerkid.straightmom, Blue Sky at qksm.bsky.social, and Facebook at Queer Kid Straight Mom. We are no longer on Twitter.